Good morning, everyone. Morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Victor. Hi, Doctor. Good morning.
Okay. Right. Let me just check the attendance. Today is 17th, yeah. 17th. Thursday. Right. Just say yes if you are present, please, okay? You have Razan Ihsan,
Yes.
okay? Ruqayya Akram. Ruqayya Akram. No. Shahad Barjas.
Yes, I'm here.
Sam. Ala Bassam. Batul Habas. Batul. Rana Hamid.
Yes.
Okay. Dina Hassan.
Yes.
Okay. Ahmed Hussein. Ahmed Hussein. Layan Khalid.
Yes. Yes, Doctor.
This is Aya Darras, yes? So Rawan is present? I mean Layan.
Yes, Doctor.
Okay. Right. Rawan Ribhi.
Yes, Doctor.
Okay. Layan Zakaria.
Yes.
Layan Zakaria.
Yes, Doctor.
Natali Ziad.
Yes, Doctor.
Right. Dunya Samer. Arub Suleiman. Arub Suleiman. No. Amatul Rahman.
Yes.
Okay. Aya Salahuddin. Okay.
نعم.
Yeah. Rusliya. Are you there, Rusliya? Farah Talib. Farah Talib. Yasmin Abdel Nasser. Well, you have to be doubly careful about attendance. Yasmin Abdel Nasser is absent. Lubna Abdullah Al-Khatib.
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah, okay. Muhammad Uthman. Muhammad Uthman.
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah. Hiba Ali. Hiba Ali.
Yes, Doctor.
Right.
Yes,
Usama Ali. Right. Dalal Imaduddin.
Yes, Doctor.
Okay. Do we have Mahmoud Bassam? Mahmoud
Yes,
Bassam.
Doctor.
Are you there, Mahmoud?
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah, okay. Right. Noor Omar Hassan. Noor has to be careful, by the way. Noor Omar Hassan. Tala Isa. Tala Isa Yaqub. absent. شوق فهد. شوق فهد.
نعم دكتور.
Yeah, okay. آلاء ماهر.
Yes,
آلاء
doctor.
ماهر
I'm
المراقي.
here.
Yeah, okay. رهف ماهر. أمنية is present. أمنية مثنى.
Yes دكتور. Yes.
Okay. يوسف محمد.
Yes, دكتور.
Yeah, okay. ضحى محمد حسن.
Yes, doctor.
Right. بسمة محمد.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, okay. سلسبيل.
Yes, doctor.
سلسبيل. بشرى محمد. بشرى محمد عدنان. إبراهيم محمد. أفنان محمد. أفنان محمد. روزان محمود.
Yes دكتور.
حنين موسى.
Yes, doctor.
Right. عيسى موسى.
Yes, doctor.
عيسى موسى. Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Okay. لانا ناصر. لانا ناصر الصوفي. ربى نبيل.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, okay. وعد نزال.
Yes دكتور.
Right. يزيد نعيم. يزيد نعيم. 30. Right. مرح نواف.
Yes, doctor.
مرح. Okay. فرح هيثم. فرح هيثم. زيد ياسر. لينا ياسين.
دكتور
Yes,
موجود.
doctor.
Who is that? زيد ياسر.
دكتور
زيد ياسر.
موجود.
Okay.
And Lena.
لينا ياسين.
Yes, doctor.
Adil Yusuf. Adil.
Yes, doctor.
Right. Good. Okay. I think that's it.
دكتور أنا ما ناديت على اسمي.
آلاء بسام.
يس.
أكيد ما ناديت اسمك ولا ناديت الاسم ما كنت موجودة؟
أنا هلا أجيت قبل شوي.
دكتور أنا عروب.
ناديت اسمك يا عروب. وناديت آلاء. آلاء بسام رقم 4. وعروب بعدها على طول.
Good morning دكتور.
Good morning.
دكتور أنا اسمي لانا هلأ دخلت.
What's your full name?
لانا الصوفي.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. So we carry on with the concept of politeness. Since politeness is a social act, one has to master not just the words, the structure, but how, when, and where to use a certain structure. So we may have 3 or 4 structures, but we need to use the right structure in the right context. This is why in teaching language, we often teach, in say 10, 15 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, emphasis was laid on teaching grammar, reading, and vocabulary. That's why most people, when it comes to speaking and listening comprehension and speaking, they make a mess of the language. Why? Because they are not taught language in context. Now, in conversation or in writing, I mean, in both verbal and written communication, we have to master the use of certain structures, the use that makes the speaker sound polite without offending anybody's feelings. So if you want to sound, okay, if you want your message to be accepted, you have to use a proper way of expressing your ideas. I mean, the idea is there. The idea is there. You have different choices. You have different choices of expressing the same idea. Choosing one form of expression rather than another requires mastering pragmatics, the pragmatic use of language. This is why, I mean, nowadays, part and parcel of teaching language is teaching situational dialogues. Situational dialogues. It's not just how many grammatical rules you know, or how many vocabulary. I mean, 2,000, 1,000 vocabulary. I know some students. I was told just 2 weeks ago by one of my colleagues. He said that he's working very hard to learn English, and he has learned about 5,000 words, which is very good. It's very good. I mean, of course, we need to have an inventory of vocabulary. Yeah, and we also need to have a list of grammatical rules. This is part and parcel of acquiring or learning a native or a foreign language. The more vocabulary, the more structure we have, the better our performance gets. But as I said, this is not the whole story. We need to be familiar not only with the language, but with the cultural background of the speakers of that language. So what sounds polite in one's language, native language, may not sound so in another language, in a target language. So for instance, if you don't get the message from somebody, what would you say in English? Suppose that I asked somebody a question, he didn't get it, and he says, for instance, he says, "What?" How would that sound in an English-speaking country? Suppose that you ask somebody a question, he doesn't get it. You don't get it, okay? And you say, "What?" How would that sound?
Rude.
Rude.
Yeah, it sounds rude, definitely. So in Arabic, I hear people often say, I mean, they use what whenever if they are unclear about something, if they are asked something they don't understand or they don't get the message, yeah, they say what. Now, what sounds impolite in that sort of culture? So they would say,
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
pardon. They would use, I mean, this is how language is used pragmatically. How to use the proper form, the proper expression in the proper context. So I wonder if you've seen a book, I mean, entitled, in British they say entitled, by the way. In American they say titled. Titled American, entitled British. So they use the prefix en. It's called What to Say. Have you seen that? Have you seen that book? What to Say in 28 situational dialogues. It's just a sample. It's a
Yes,
sample.
Dr.
It's a sample of situational dialogues. So what to say at the airport, at the customs, at the dentists, at the doctors, at a restaurant, how to ask the way, how to report something to the lost property office, on the bus. I mean, this is how language should be learned and taught. So it's not simply having a list of linguistic forms, a list of vocabulary, a list of structures. So, for instance, in order to sound polite, we have to observe three principles. We have to observe three principles. Since politeness is a social behavior, it's a social behavior, since it's an etiquette, yeah, one needs to observe three principles, three main principles. One is to observe the social ethics of any given society. We have to observe the social ethics. What do you mean by that? Every society has a social ethic. I mean, a set. Every society has a set of social ethics. That's to say, habits, norms, customs, way of life. So we have to observe as we learn a target language, we have to be careful about its cultural and social context. So for instance, in some cultures, one is not supposed to mention his wife's name. Yeah. In conversation, in dialogue. Yeah. If two people meet, it's forbidden to mention somebody's wife's name. This is part of the Arab culture, by the way. In our culture, we don't use, in some societies, of course, in some societies, yeah, they don't like to mention one's mother's name or wife's name. This is part of the norms of society. So in order to communicate well, you shouldn't offend others by asking about something that is culturally and socially prohibited. So what do we see? What do we do instead in Arabic when we have situational dialogue? What do we do?
Sometimes they say البيت المدام العيال.
Okay, that's it. I mean, they use alternative expressions. So using for instance, instead of her name, using أخوال. يعني مثلا I've been to Saudi Arabia, for instance. I spent more than 2 decades there. They would ask about أخوال الأولاد. Where do they come from? Yeah, they wouldn't say where does your wife come from, because that's considered impolite. It shows disrespect to one's culture or social ethics. So we have to be careful. First, we have to observe the social ethics of any given community or society. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing, so for instance, in the English culture, people would be offended if asked about their weight. This is very much offending. So don't ever discuss weight. If somebody is overweight, underweight, this is none of your business. Don't tackle or raise such issues in communication and situational dialogues. Don't tell somebody that he or she is fat, for instance. This may work in some cultures. It's acceptable, but not in the English-speaking culture. Asking about one's salary. I mean, he or she wouldn't answer. They wouldn't answer. They keep mum about it, and they just feel they feel they feel bad about it if somebody asks them about their salary, because it's something personal. So you are intruding. You are intruding into the territory. You are imposing yourself. You are asking unnecessary information or private. They consider it as private information. Yeah. What? So, yes.
كنت بدي أعطي مثال.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
In Korea, there is impolite to call your biggest brother and sister by their names.
Your guests.
No, brother and sister.
Oh, brother and sister.
Yes.
You're not supposed to mention their names.
Yes, if they are younger than you.
If they are younger than you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in our culture,
they have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Carry on, Dina.
They have a certain expression like
you're not supposed to mention your brother's or sister's name if they are younger.
Yes, you can. You should use another expression.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
How about this? How about this? Now, in the Arab culture, by the way, we say Arab culture, not Arabic culture. We say the Arabic language. We say Arabic and Arabic language. But when it comes to culture, we say Arab culture, not Arabic culture. So Arabic is confined to language. Okay. How about in our culture? Would it be polite to ask about somebody's father's name?
Yes.
Would it be acceptable?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, it is. In our culture, it's okay. But don't do this. Never do this. If you talk to a British, an American, an Australian, because that's offending. It's offending. They feel embarrassed. He would feel, of course, we once received a TOEFL exam from the States. And they gave instructions. I had to conduct the test, the TOEFL test, here in Jordan. And they wrote the following. I wasn't aware of that before, I mean, reading the instructions. But I'm always doubly careful when it comes to, pragmatics or linguistics. So they wrote first name, yeah, which sounded okay. So you can give your first name. Then surname, which is okay. Then a third question was your father's name, if you have any, if you have one. Father's name, if you have one. Just imagine, yeah, just imagine addressing someone in Jordan, yeah, and saying, what's your father's name if you have one? How would he feel about it? How would you feel? Yeah, he goes mad.
And offended.
Sorry, and of course, yeah. Of course, I mean, if you ask somebody, if what's your father's name if you have one? That's a big insult, Now, the reason why in some societies, not just Western societies, but Eastern societies, in Russia, in China, for instance, if you watch some series nowadays, TV series, a common theme is to talk about love children. I've watched a number of series from a linguistic point of view or a pragmatic point of view. I just want to check, so you can see Korean movies, Korean, Turkish, some Arab, even nowadays, some Arab movies. They tackle the issue of legitimizing love children. See what I mean?
Yes,
They
doctor.
try to legitimize, to
Yeah.
make love children legitimate. They advocate the idea that this should be part and parcel of the social ethics of a given society, which is quite dangerous. So it's not just committing something wrong, committing a crime, as you know. I mean, in all divine religions, I mean, this is in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This is a crime. It's a crime to have, it's a crime to commit adultery or fornication, isn't it? It's a crime, yes? and it's a taboo, it's impolite to use the word bastard. It's a swearing, which occurs very often in movies. But sometimes translators, instead of rendering the term bastard, which is a taboo, of course, instead of saying rendering, giving the exact equivalent of the word bastard, which means an illegitimate child. Yeah, what do they say? Is that what they say? Do they always say this? Sometimes they say wicked. Even غير الشرعي. Do they say this? I mean, not all movies. I've seen a number of movies where this is avoided. They use a al-waqt. They say al-waqt. Waqt is an equivalent of wicked. Wicked, yeah. And nowadays, instead of saying bastard in modern English, of course, they tend to say love child. We have to be aware about the use of love nowadays. So a bastard is referred to as a love child. That's why we need to learn the social context of a language, the cultural and social context of any given language. So nowadays, if you are reading a text, if you are watching a movie, yeah, you come across love child. Now, love child has a good connotation. Most people seem to be unaware of this, so they think that it's related to love. But love child is a euphemism. Euphemism. E-U-P-H. Euphemism. E-M-I-S-M. Euphemism. We call it تلطيف العبارة يعني. An عبارة لطيفة used to express a word with a bad connotation. It could be a crime, it could be unpleasant news and unpleasant news. So they use euphemisms. I mean, how would you translate make love, for instance? ممارسة الحظ. Now, what does, I mean, as translation major students, how would you translate make love?
نصنع الحب دكتور.
Sorry?
نصنع الحب أو شيء.
ويا ريت تكون يصنع الحب. No, that would be to fall in love. That would be to fall in love. But make love in English means to commit adultery. Commit adultery or fornication. That's what it exactly means. We are doing this because this is part and parcel of the cultural background of English nowadays, or French, or most, I mean, modern languages. I mean, with globalization, languages undergo a drastic change. They undergo a drastic change. Social, cultural, educational, biological. I mean, they are changing. They are introducing new concepts. They are changing the meaning of certain concepts. Yeah. They are trying to make legitimate some laws. For instance, one of the laws enacted was to allow or permit abortion. 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 You know what that means? Abortion. Abortion and al-jihad. Al-jihad is murder, isn't it? This is categorically forbidden in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and of course in some other religions and cultures. But who decides whether to make it legal or not? Yeah, I mean, would you agree? I mean, to
if it's danger, there is a danger.
would you agree to kill a person who is an embryo who is about say 5 months or 6 months? Would that be,
No, because
isn't that murder? I mean, isn't that murder?
yes,
Murder,
they have
deliberate murder. Millions of children, by the way, the world over, are murdered every year on annual basis. Yeah, millions of people. In India, for instance, if they discover that that the embryo is a female, they got rid of her. And in some societies, of course, there was infanticide. Infanticide means burying a female, a girl, alive. That was a practice, a common practice.
وقت البنات دكتور.
وقت البنات, infanticide they call it. Infanticide. 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 So a number of, I mean, love child. It sounds good. To make love. Make love, I mean, Osama, you said ممارسة الجنس, yes? Yeah? Is this what you said? What is ممارسة الجنس? Yeah, I mean, this is, sometimes they say extramarital